Could a small island nation a mere 90 miles from the coast of Florida spark a revolution that would cast a lingering shadow around the globe? Nestled in the Caribbean Sea, this question unfolded into a harsh reality. Cuba, a land graced with stunning beaches and a vibrant culture, was thrust into the vortex of a political upheaval that would echo ominously around the world. The Cuban Revolution, a convoluted and tumultuous struggle that lasted from 1953 to 1959, signaled a time of drastic upheaval, setting a worrisome precedent not just for the island nation, but for the entire world. At the epicenter of this turmoil was the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista, whose oppressive regime had long been a cause of discontent within the Cuban people. Batista's rule was rife with corruption, economic exploitation, and severe suppression of political dissidents. His reign ignited internal unrest, amplifying the economic disparities and social injustices that riddled the nation. Therefore, the Cuban populace was desperate for change, a sentiment capitalized upon by the charismatic, yet enigmatic, Fidel Castro. A lawyer by profession, Castro was a man of unwavering conviction, whose vision of a socialist state appealed to the Cuban masses. He emerged as a potent force against Batista's regime, promising a utopian future for all Cubans. In 1953, the seeds of revolution were sown in earnest at the Moncada Barracks, a military garrison in Santiago de Cuba. In the early morning of July 26th, a young and ambitious Fidel Castro led a group of revolutionaries in a daring but tragically unsuccessful attack against Batista's forces. This incident ignited a relentless struggle against a despotic regime. The repercussions of the ill-fated Moncada Barracks attack were considerable. It resulted in Castro's imprisonment, which ironically spurred greater public support for his cause. Upon his release, Castro fled to Mexico, where he assembled an army of revolutionaries known as the 26th of July movement. Together, they waged a guerrilla war against Batista's government, gaining momentum and, unfortunately, significant public support. Despite numerous setbacks and obstacles, Castro's tenacity remained unbroken. He rallied his forces, employing unconventional tactics and strategic planning that ultimately led to the collapse of Batista's regime. In 1959, the downfall of the regime was imminent. Batista abandoned Cuba on New Year's Eve, leaving Castro to seize power and establish a socialist state, ominously altering the political landscape of the Western Hemisphere. The Cuban Revolution, like all historical events, was riddled with complexities. It was a period of intense struggle, sacrifice, and eventually drastic transformation. The echoes of this revolution were not confined to Cuba alone, but reverberated globally, influencing political ideologies and international relations. The aftermath, however, was a country plunged into economic hardship and political repression. The promised utopia of socialism under Castro's rule brought about a new set of problems, with lack of basic freedoms and economic stagnation. This event marked the dawn of the Cuban Revolution, a tumultuous period that would irreversibly alter the course of the country's history, with negative impacts still felt to this day. Following the Moncada Barracks attack, Castro found himself confined within prison walls. This capture, however, had an unexpected effect. Instead of dampening his aspirations, it ignited them further, forging the iron will that would become a defining characteristic of his authoritarian rule. In the chilling, isolated conditions of imprisonment, Castro did not wallow in self-pity. Rather, he found a symbol of the struggle he was ready to endure for his control and power. The adversity did not deter him. Instead, it solidified his determination, made him even more resolute in his desire for control, and sharpened his aim of seizing power from a regime he perceived as oppressive and corrupt. His sentence was not simply a punishment, it evolved into a stepping stone for shaping his quest for dominance. Far from breaking him, it elevated his conviction, molding him into a symbol of rebellion and a figure of authority. During his trial, Castro cleverly utilized the platform not as a defendant, but as a political manipulator. His speeches, charged with powerful rhetoric, were filled with potent political ideas that resonated with the masses. His infamous declaration, "History will absolve me," served as a chilling testament to his defiance, echoing through the halls of justice, the ears of the prosecution, and reverberating through the heart of the Cuban population. Upon his release, Castro did not remain in his homeland. He sought refuge in Mexico, strategically using it as a base where he could regroup and reassemble. In Mexico, he gathered a group of revolutionaries who supported his vision, not of a free and democratic Cuba, but one under his absolute rule. Among this group were individuals who would become notorious figures in the Cuban Revolution, including his brother Raúl and the notorious Che Guevara. The group was christened as the 26th of July Movement, a name that would echo ominously in the annals of Cuban history. Named after the date of the Moncada barracks attack, it symbolized not the start of a fight for freedom, but the beginning of an era of domination and control. In 1956, Castro, along with the 26th of July movement, returned to Cuba. They sailed aboard the yacht Granma, a vessel that would symbolize their revolution. This marked the onset of a brutal war against Batista's regime, a struggle that would ultimately result in an authoritarian regime led by Castro that would inflict suffering and hardship on the Cuban people and leave an indelible mark on the pages of history. The revolutionaries fought a brutal guerrilla war in the Sierra Maestra Mountains that resulted in numerous human rights abuses. The civilian population was caught in the crossfire, experiencing the devastation of war and economic hardship. As the revolutionaries gained ground, the tide of the revolution appeared to be turning in their favor. By December 1958, a decisive but destructive victory at the Battle of Santa Clara under Che Guevara's leadership paved the way for their entry into Havana on January 1, 1959. Batista had fled, leaving behind a nation in turmoil, and Castro's forces took over, leading to further economic hardship and widespread human rights violations. Following the revolution, a series of broad-reaching social and economic reforms swept across the nation, marked by the nationalization of industry and the implementation of socialist policies. However, these moves weren't without their shadows. Indeed, they cast a significant pall over the country, giving rise to intense political repression, rampant human rights abuses, and widespread economic hardship among many Cubans. These socialist policies directly catalyzed a period of severe distress. Furthermore, the Cuban Revolution resonated beyond its borders, creating ripples in international politics. The infamous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the precipice of nuclear war, underscoring the geopolitical significance of this small Caribbean nation. A significance that was, in no small part, exacerbated by the ruinous domestic policies at play. So, what conclusions can we draw? The Cuban Revolution, sparked by a mere group of revolutionaries, toppled a dictatorship only to establish a socialist state, effectively altering the course of history. This was a period of tumultuous change, characterized by questionable victories, inevitable defeats, and deep-seated transformations. However, the price paid for these changes was exorbitantly high, and the aftermath of the revolution continues to reverberate, not just within Cuba, but globally. In retrospect, the Cuban Revolution serves as a stark warning about the devastating consequences of the enduring struggle for freedom, justice, and equality under socialism, and it underscores the potential dangers that can arise when the populace rises against perceived oppression, the misguided strength of conviction, and the intricate complications of political change. And it prompts us to question, to reflect, to remember. As long as these narratives continue to be relayed, the cautionary tale of the Cuban Revolution will never fade.